Thanks.
Ready?
Yes.
Ready.
Okay.
Martial
Hi.
arts, man. Hello, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I am super excited for our episode today for multiple reasons. One, I've got my good buddy Brian Hart back here with me once again. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too.
Yeah, and Hitman Hart is back. So,
Yeah.
and today we have come up with a great episode for you, Martial Arts Mayhem. Wacha! That's my martial
Yeah.
arts mayhem
Nice.
action pose.
Very good.
We're
Very
gonna
good.
this was Brian's idea. We wanted to do something fun and we were gonna do 5 movies. So we're gonna go quickly today through martial arts mayhem. And then as I watched them, I realized a couple of these are cheating because they're not technically martial arts movies, but we'll talk about that when we get to them. But we
Yeah,
both
sounds
love
good.
martial arts movies. They can be a lot of fun. We chose some really long ones this time, which was kind of poor Brian. He was crunching 3-hour movies. So some of these are
Like
martial
these
arts.
big epic saga
Yeah,
movies.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm glad I
Whose
started
idea was
early.
this? Dang it.
That was you, buddy.
Oh
So,
yeah,
although I
okay,
chose one of the
okay.
long ones, but so you chose another really long one. So we'll just kick it
Yes.
off with our first movie, A Touch of Zen from 1971. I chose this one because it's on a ton of critics lists and I've never seen it, and it's like 3 hours. King Hugh directed it, who is considered one of the masters of martial arts films in the 70s. It's about an ordinary artist who's pretty unambitious, who falls for a fugitive who is being hunted by agents of the imperial government. This film came out in 1971 and actually was not a big hit when it first came out. But then later on in 1975, it actually showed at the Cannes Film Festival, won a bunch of awards. It was actually up for the major award, which is pretty unusual for martial arts movies. And then got a lot of acclaim after the fact because of the Cannes Film Festival. So it was kind of seen as an alternative to the more populist Bruce Lee type of action martial arts films. Touch of Zen is much more of an art house martial arts movie. It brings in elements of Buddhism and has a pretty long, complicated plot. And I was a little worried when I first started watching this because it's probably almost 45 minutes into the film before any action actually starts, which is
Right.
unusual usually for martial arts kung fu type movies. What I enjoyed about this movie is there's some really unusual characters. The film is mostly seen through the eyes of this main character Gu, who is really not a hero at all. He's kind of and he's just an ordinary guy. He doesn't do any action. So it's often seen through his perspective. He's watching the action unfold. The woman he's in love with, the fugitive, she's really kind of the action star of the movie, along with some Buddhist monks who come in and they have like gold emanating from their bodies, and then they do awesome moves as well. So I'm curious what you thought about this one, Brian.
Yeah, I really love this movie. This was also another movie that I've heard about, of course, for a long time, but never seen. So I was excited to watch it, and then I saw 3 hours, and I was like, oh boy, how am I even going to watch this? And I thought I read somewhere that it was actually broken up into 2 movies,
Hmm.
so that makes sense. But I definitely recommend seeing it all at once. Just get prepared, and it is, like you said, not your typical super action,
Right.
just right off the bat. But that's why I love it so much. The scenery and the cinematography is just hypnotizing, and it kind of reminded me like of a kung fu kind of epic, like Hitchcockian kind of movie, because it's got
Hmm.
these like imagery and the suspense and this like underlining presence that of sense of dread in these things, but definitely in its very own unique way. And I was just mesmerized. And it is kind of like almost 2 or 3 films like into one, and you wouldn't think that would work, but it does in such a great way. I just loved it.
Oh,
There
I'm
was
glad it
times where
kept you
I was,
awake. I was worried since you were so
yeah,
tired this week.
exactly. And I thought I was in trouble, but then there was times where I was like, I'm not even reading anything, or I kind of know what's going on, but I was just like hypnotized. They kind of, one of the main sets is this kind of abandoned area, and it's just it allowed them to do so many unique things with all this kind of haunted imagery and overgrown, areas, and it just made it so cool. And I really, really like this one.
Yeah, that area where the main character actually lives, and they live there because it's rent free. So,
Yeah,
which lots of people can probably identify with right now, but
yeah,
it's one of
exactly.
the reasons it's rent free is because it's considered haunted. And so they take
Yep,
advantage of this to set up kind
yeah,
of like a trap for the bad guys. And apparently the director wanted they basically built this village from hand, and then they left it just sitting for 6 months to make it look weathered.
oh
So it would
wow,
look like an old abandoned place. They just left it out in the
yeah,
weather for 6 months. And so the fact it had, obviously a big budget then, which is why they were really
yep,
disappointed when it did do well at first, because people just weren't used to also the themes and the characters. There's a love scene and a baby born out of wedlock, and there's some different themes that people were a little bit like, whoa, we're not used to this. And so
yeah,
so it was, it was groundbreaking for its time. Still really cool to watch now. I thought the
yep,
ghost scene was particularly funny when they were like
yeah,
freaking out the Imperial guards with
yeah,
so he ends up being useful because not because he's an action guy, the main character, but because he thinks of this scheme like, okay, we know we're outnumbered. They basically got 4 people to fight against the entire Imperial army. How are we gonna we're going to use the fact that there's this idea that this place is haunted to kind of get basically play psychological warfare with the bad guys. So
yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So
and that whole, I heard they built that village, and that might sound, especially back when it was made, that might say, oh, it's going to look super cheesy. It looks amazing. It
no,
does
it looks
not.
really good.
And, they built this village, but then it's a lot of practical stuff. There's so much fight scenes these days that are CGI and, it
Hmm.
looks just like a video game. This looks amazing.
Well,
It
that's one
looks
of the
like
things
a
I love
real
about
place.
right. That's one of the things I love about a lot of the martial arts films, especially some of the older ones, is they actually did build the sets.
Yep.
So it's real stuff. It's not all just CGI. Even some of the newer ones, they do that. So I think that's pretty cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
and people can find this movie. It's on a few different places. I think you saw it on Amazon, is that right?
Yeah.
Or on
Yeah.
Prime. And then I
I
watched
rented
it
it
on
on Prime.
Criterion Channel, and it was an amazing transfer. It had been restored, so definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I
So
almost bought it immediately. That's how much I loved it. So I
oh
just
wow,
was like, I need to purchase this one. So probably
yeah,
probably will.
yeah, probably will. So that's really cool. So moving from 1971 to 2010, so a lot newer here. 13 Assassins is our next film, by the renowned filmmaker Takashi Miike, probably butchering these names. A group of samurai assassins come together to kill an evil lord in this film. And it's kind of a ragtag group of assassins. This is a story we've seen a lot. In fact, when it first started, I was like, is this the plot of Seven Samurai?
Yeah.
um,
Just a
so
couple
one of
more.
yeah, there's just more than seven assassins, so there's 13. And they're actually not all samurai, which is why they call it 13 assassins. 12 of them are actual samurai. One is a random crazy guy who just is kind of bored and really just wants to kick some butt, basically. And he turns out to be one of the better fighters because he just gets in there. He's just like, yeah, this is fun. Let's kick some butt. And he just comes along for the ride. Um, this one of the really things this was another one that's a more recently acclaimed martial arts film. But what I loved about this one is that the evil lord is really evil. Like they really do a good job of setting up all his evil deeds at the beginning to set up why they've decided to assassinate him because he's essentially um, become, like part of the cabinet of the prime minister and is working his way up through power. And so there's this plot in the government. There's a guy in the government who wants to overthrow this guy, but he can't be seen doing it. And um, so he kind of secretly hires these assassins to take down this guy. And he shows the assassins the stories of the people that have been wronged by this evil lord. And it's awful. Like one woman, he cut off her arms and legs and her tongue to use her as his plaything. I mean, just really, really horrific. And they bring her in to show her. And it's one of the most horrifying scenes I've seen in any of these movies. I mean, so you really, by the time you even like introduce the evil lord, you already hate the guy. So you're
Yeah.
ready for the assassins to go after him. And it's really a fight to the death. They know they're outnumbered. There's 13 of them. There's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the evil lord's army that's protecting him. So they set up this grand battle that goes on for quite a while at the end and is pretty bloody. So I'm curious what you thought about this film, Brian.
Yeah, yeah, and by quite a while, it's like 45 minutes to an hour. Like it's just so grueling and so intense. And I like was almost physically like tired after watching it, but again, in a really good way because it's just so brutal. It just really captured the kind of brutality of war, and it's not glamorous. And even though these guys are honorable shoguns that yes know the understanding that
Hmm.
they're going to die, that's like the highest honor for them. Actually, they
Yeah.
want to do this, and you're rooting for them. But the savagery of everything, it just really comes clear in this. And yeah, I was just like exhausted. And this director, we've actually, I know you and I have talked to some of his other films, Audition, and you tried to watch Ichi the Killer, I think, and it's like too much. So he's very known for really pushing the envelope and pushing your emotions. This is toned down into the a little bit, it's not quite so like torture porn, but it's
Yeah,
pretty
it's not
savage.
torture porn like Audition, which is very hard to watch,
Yeah,
but it's pretty savage
yeah,
war basically scenes, and that shows also how terrible the evil Lord is because at the end he's like, "Oh, I love this," because they're actually
yeah.
in a
Oh,
time of
yeah,
peace. And so a
yeah,
lot of the samurais haven't been doing anything. Samurais don't have a lot to do other than protect their lords during times of peace. So that's also sort of the setup is that these guys are basically sort of underemployed, which is one of the
yeah.
reasons they sign up. Even though I don't think there's a big paycheck, it's just like our job is to be samurais, and we're right now there's no fighting. So,
Right.
but then he's like, oh, he's watching the brutality and he's watching it and he says, this is amazing. I love this. And we're all
Yeah,
watching it
let's
going,
get
this is
back to
horrific.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
let's
it's
get back to
really, I
the
mean,
good old days.
they're in the mud. It's not glamorous. This is not like Touch of Zen or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. There's nobody flying through beautiful trees. It's mud
Yeah.
and dirt and blood and just splattering everywhere. And the people look injured and they're dragging their one leg behind them, trying to keep fighting with their swords.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So brutal.
yeah,
Oh,
I
and someone
really
go.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Someone compared this evil prince or whoever he is. I forget his title exactly. Kind of the evil character in this to King Joffrey of Game of Thrones. So if you're a Game of Thrones fan and you know what that means, basically just super spoiled, loves to torture people. But so if you like that, I think give this a shot too, because that'll you'll be able to see what this person's like immediately. And
Right. His name is Lord Naragatsu or
Lord,
Naritsugu. And
yes.
and I don't know the actor. I didn't recognize there's some of the actors in this I did recognize from other Asian films I've seen,
Hmm.
but I did not recognize that actor, but I thought he was very good because you really, really
Really,
hate him. Yeah,
yeah,
he's very
instantly.
evil. Yeah.
Like you see what he does, and then just his little smirk and his little laugh, and how much he enjoys it, and you're just like, whoa, like the
Yeah.
worst person ever.
Yeah, and he's super spoiled. You're right. Like he's
Yeah,
basically got his position because he's related. He's like the
yeah,
son or stepson of someone important.
yeah.
And
Knows he's untouchable essentially. That's why they have
right.
to do all this in secret, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
another
And
really, really good film.
and you kind of feel bad for the samurai. There's samurai that are sworn to protect him, and they don't like him at all, but
Right.
they have to protect him too. So they fight to the death to protect this guy who has no respect for them whatsoever. So
Yeah.
it's a really kind of interesting, complicated film in that way. Like it's just there's a lot of ambivalence about what they're doing. Is there any winners really at the end of this
Yeah.
film?
Right.
But I like that about it. It has some moral ambiguity. So, which you don't always see in martial arts films because it's often, I mean, even though he's evil at the end, you kind of feel like it's just kind of sad, because so much life was lost.
Yeah, the ending was not what I expected. I'll just kind of leave it at that, but it was really good. I really like how they ended it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move on to your pick.
Yes. Okay. So this is one of my epic picks here, an epic saga. It's Once Upon a Time in China. It came out in 1991. It was directed by Choi Hawk, who is another very famous director, starring Jet Li, and also, and I'm going to mess up some of these too, Rosamund Kwan and Biao Yuen. The film is set in Foshan, China, and sometime in the late 19th century during the Qing dynasty. And there's this threat of Western civilization, both British and American, and how it threatens China in its traditions. And so they kind of Wang Fei Hung, who's played by Jet Li, is this martial arts teacher and traditional medicine healer, and he's trying to save China from those threats and keep its tradition. Wang Fei Hung is actually based off of a real life person and is one of the biggest folk heroes in China. He really has no equal anywhere in the world. Kind of, some people say he's like a comic book character, superhero, but he's been played by some of the biggest actors in China, including Tuak Kung-hing, who played him in 81 different movies alone,
Oh,
but
wow.
also, yeah, again, Jet Li and just tons of people have played him, Jackie Chan. And then there's the Once Upon a Time series of why it's epic. There's tons of films. Once Upon a China has 6 different movies. It became the series and a TV series. And then there's also Once Upon a Time in the West, which I think was the first one. Once Upon a Time in America, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that just came out. So there's this whole, like, there's so many elements of this movie besides its own plot. But essentially, Wang Fei Hung is trying to defend China from this Western civilization. And then there's also this rival instructor who comes to town. He also works in medicine and in Kung Fu and wants to, or not Kung Fu, but martial arts, and wants to open up his own. So he challenges Wang Fei Hung along with all this other turmoil happening. And again, it's just the cinematography, the epicness of this tale, and how it talks about traditional Chinese values and their traditions and the threat of it. It's very real, but it has a little bit of something for everybody. It's got comedy, it's got this amazing cinematography, and also these bigger, deeper philosophical terms of, and you can even relate it to your own tradition where you live, and kind of this civilization, how, and technology and how it changes things, and how much of that do you let go and keep in that balance? Because soon realizes that he has to embrace some of this. China is going to change, but how much, and how, and they kind of decide that. It was just really good. I can't wait to hear what you think about it.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting take on the kind of the evil Westerners coming in. There's the English
Yeah,
and the British in this
yeah,
film, and they're courting the Chinese for different reasons. But they, at one point, the woman says to Jet Li's character, she says, "Do you think it's true that the streets are of gold in America, like we hear?"
yeah,
And he says, "Well, if that was true, why would they be over here? Why are they here trying to take our land?" And I thought, oh, good point, Jet Li. So I liked some of the political aspect of this film. The thing I did really enjoy it. I've seen it before actually. I saw it a long time ago, so I didn't remember it very well. So I rewatched it. And the thing about this film, talk about a film that needs a new transfer. I don't know if they have
yeah.
a new box set or anything out, and it's just not available on streaming. I watched it on Amazon, and it was a horrible transfer. It was everyone's faces were stretched out, so they did it
Yep.
in standard def, and it just looked horrible. And there was a lot of complaints about that. When I went on Amazon's website, people were really complaining because apparently there is a new Blu-ray of it available. And for whatever reason, they haven't made it available on streaming in that format where it actually looks really good, because the cinematography is supposed to be pretty amazing in the film. But I did enjoy this one. This is another one that's pretty darn long, two and a
Yeah.
half hours, I think.
Yeah.
And kind of felt that way a few times to me at certain points,
Mm.
because there's a lot of story kind of exposition going on at points, but some of the great sequences, like the one in the room with all the barrels and he's fighting through like just a ton of guys, that was really cool. While the other person's like hanging from the ceiling, and there's just some great sequences like that, and I really enjoyed the kind of the political aspect of the West meets East, and trying to eventually he figures out, oh, I'm going to have to, like you said, maybe accept some new ways, but how do I also keep our traditional Chinese culture alive? So I really enjoyed that. And I could see that would also be, for the time this was made, probably a very popular theme as well. And of course you have
Yeah.
Jet Li, who's just awesome.
Yeah. Just amazing. Jet Li in his prime. I think it was before he kind of broke into some American films. So, but he was
Hmm.
like top of his game in China. And
Huge
yeah, it
star. And this was a
really
big
makes
hit,
you
right?
appreciate. I believe it was, I think it
Yeah.
was, I mean, Choi Hark is such a popular, some people, I hate saying things like this, but the Steven Spielberg of China, he's very, very famous, very well known. This was known as an epic saga that was coming up. So I think, and with the political and East kind of
Hmm.
West nature of it. Yeah, and then of course it became 5 or 6 different films and a TV series. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. A lot of
which is
fun,
I
yeah.
didn't know about the TV series. I do know that Criterion has a box set, so that's something to think about too. Which yeah, I don't know why if it
Oh, for
has it.
Once Upon a Time in China?
Yeah, and maybe it was a limited run, but as I was gathering my notes, someone was like, "Oh, Criterion just came up and held it up," and I'm like, "I want that one. I want that one. Why did I see
Yeah,
it?
the
Because
good transfer. Yeah, and they don't have it on their
yeah,
channel, so that's interesting. I'll have to
yeah, it was
research that
very,
because I'd love to see a better transfer of this movie because, like I said, I
yeah,
watched it on Prime. Be careful if you do try to watch this on Prime, folks, because there's two versions, and one is an edited
yeah,
version that's like 30 minutes shorter, and it's like the worst. I started watching it, and it literally just starts like somewhere in like in the middle of a scene where it doesn't make any sense. And I thought, am I watching the right version? And because sometimes Amazon has like multiple versions of the same movie. And then I noticed it was shorter than another version on there. And so I said, I better watch the longer version of this film.
yeah.
So, because I was
We'll
worried
take
I
a
was
two and a
watching.
half hour film and just, start at 30 minutes in. There, it's shorter.
That's how they did it, basically, because it was cut
Yeah,
like 20, 30 minutes and it just starts in the middle of his. And I
it's
was
crazy.
really confused. Like, am I missing something? Yes, I was. So be careful if you do try to watch this on Amazon
That's
Prime. So I'm really excited to talk about your next one, though, which was your pick. And I'm
yeah.
super jazzed about this one. So let's
All
launch
right,
into it.
cool. So this one's Iron Monkey. This one was produced in 1983, produced by Choi Hawk and directed by Yin Wu Ping. It stars Donnie Yen, Yu Raganog, sorry, Jin Wong, and a bunch of other people that I can't pronounce. So, masked martial, and I know I feel so bad about that. I'm the worst. It's a
I'm the
masked
worst,
martial.
actually. You've
Well,
done much better than I have this episode on the
well, I
names.
practiced Choi Hawk for about 20 minutes this
Oh,
morning
good job.
because it does not look like that. So the Iron Monkey is a masked martial artist who travels around town during the night to rob the rich and help the poor. So think Robin Hood, very
Hmm.
much so. This makes him very popular, of course, to the poor, but very wanted by the powers that be. Now, he has the alter ego, so during the day, he is this Chinese medicine physician called Yang Tai Tan Chun. And I'm not giving this away because that basically happens right in the opening of the film.
Hmm.
And he treats people with free medical treatment for the poor and then subsidizes by charging an exorbitant amount for the rich. So he's kind of doing it more on board in the daytime and then really taking advantage at nighttime when he puts on his mask and becomes the Iron Monkey. Now, then Wong Kai Ying, who is played by Donnie Yen, is all these similar themes. He is also a physician and a martial artist, and he enters the town and he wants to open up his practice and he needs to kind of he actually doesn't want to rival the doctor. They become friends. Oh, by the way, he has a young son named Wang Fei Hung. Again, the folklore of this hero. So that's the son in this movie. Um, but he is actually hired because of his martial arts skill to capture the Iron Monkey, but he befriends the doctor. So there's this play on this. I just want to really quickly talk about Yin Wu Ping. He's one of the godfathers of martial arts choreography. Also a film director. He's done Drunken Master, The Magnificent Butcher. He did a ton of U.S. films like The Matrix, Kill Bill, Fearless, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So he's a very world renowned as a fight choreographer and director. So you see all of that, the spectacle of the martial arts. And this is that old style wire work stuff where they're flying and doing these things. And people that don't like that, I always compare it to if you like superhero films, this is China's version of superheroes. These are people that can do things that are not realistic, but that is on purpose and beautiful. And I love it. And now I want to hear what you think.
I loved this film. This was probably my favorite of the
Good.
batch in a way
Oh,
because
wow.
I just love, I love this style where they're flying around and doing crazy stuff. It's just so entertaining. This is also one of the only
Yeah.
ones I think we're reviewing, might be the only one that's under 2 hours. This one's also the
Right.
hardest to find. I watched your DVD copy
It's
and it's
also not
on
great.
Amazon, but you have to pay for it, but it's only like $3. So I would recommend people do it. This one's so much fun. Unlike these others that are like these huge epics, this one is just kick butt all the way through. I mean, there is a story and there's the kid, and there is also the main character has a female warrior who's sort of in they're not really love interest, actually. They're
She is
partners, and
beautiful.
she's
My
beautiful, and
goodness.
she also kicks butt. There's some
Yeah,
amazing
super
spectacles,
tough.
and I know we have to go fast, so I'm going to say
Yeah,
the scene towards the end with the fire, and they're just doing their moves on top of these little wooden stakes where they're basically fighting each other with one leg because they're balancing themselves on these poles is absolutely amazing. And there's just
it's
one
crazy.
sequence like that. So if you're looking really just
Yeah,
for more of like a cheesy good time type martial arts
yeah,
movie, this is the
yeah,
one, as opposed to some of the other ones we've talked about, like Touch of Zen or 13 Assassins, that are much more serious. This one is not
yeah,
serious at all. This is all about
yeah.
just having fun and watching people fly around and do amazing martial
And
arts
they even
moves.
do the like they announce what attack they're gonna do before they do it,
Right, which I
like
always thought
old
was really
school kung
funny.
fu.
And they're
I
like,
love it.
they're like hidden jumper with
Stylistic
snow
attack.
blood tiger move. Here we
Yeah,
go. And I'm
and
like, why would
why
you
do you
announce to
hear
your
a
opponent what
tiger
you're
sound?
about to do to them?
Yeah, and then they
Yeah, no, a
stop
lot
them
of
with
fun.
it.
Yeah,
It's so good. Well, I'm glad
yeah,
this is the one I
love
was
this
worried
one.
about that you might not
Oh,
like
no, no.
it.
I
So,
like this
oh, okay,
style. It
good.
reminds me
Okay,
of some
cool.
of the 70s ones that are really crazy,
Yeah,
like the guy with the long arm. I can't remember the name of the film right
yeah,
now. Brian
yeah,
Michael and I reviewed it back in the day, but some of the really just crazy
yeah,
ones from the 70s. So I loved it. So totally moving on. John
yeah,
Woo, who became famous in America for films like Face Off, came back to his roots in Asia with Red Cliff in 2008. Huge, big budget spectacle. Was supposed to go with the Olympics. Then COVID hit. And so I can't imagine how much money they lost on this movie because, man, is this an epic. This is really a war movie, much more than a martial arts movie. It's about an evil prime minister seeking to unite all of the regions of China. And then he is met with opposition from some kingdoms in the south and the west that want no part of his evil plan. This has a huge all-star cast of like big names that I even recognized, like Tony Leung, who's one of my all-time favorite Hong
yeah.
Kong actors, who's in movies like In the Mood for Love. So he doesn't usually just do martial arts type movies or action movies. Takashi Kaneshiro, also an amazing, huge star in Asia. Um, and Chang Chen, also another big star. So just lots of names you're familiar with if you watch any Asian cinema at all. This is really much more of a war epic than it is a martial
Yeah.
arts film, which I didn't realize when I picked it. So I apologize, but it does have really great war strategy. It's another one that's about 3 hours, but it's fascinating because they get into so much strategy of how they are outnumbered again, like 2 to 1. This is based on a real historical event. It was a huge battle in China that really happened, and so and this is how they figure out how to basically through strategy outwit the bad guy. So, and I know we're running out of time, so I'm curious what you thought of this one.
Yeah, I'll make it super short. It was another film I really, really enjoyed. I highly recommend it. It's been on my list forever, and so I'm really glad I finally got to see it. I love John Woo. I know some people are up and down on him. He has had some
He's
bombs, but
had some
this is the one.
clunkers, yeah.
Yeah, he's had some clunkers for sure, especially when he kind of did American films. But this one's definitely on point. He's still got that John Woo style, hyper action, even though it's war. A lot of slow-mo, but I love that stuff. Those are the
And the
things I like
birds, don't
about John
forget.
Woo.
And I was
Yeah,
waiting. I was like 20 minutes. I'm like, where are the
there's
birds
like
coming
no
in, John
birds. Oh,
Woo?
there are the birds.
Yeah, he had birds flying off. In fact, there's a
That's
bird as
right.
a major character because they have a carrier pigeon. They have a spy
Yeah,
embedded with the enemy. So, okay, we
yeah.
have 8 seconds left, and I've got to
Okay.
wrap up. We loved all the films. Thank you, Brian
Yeah, they're
Hart.
all good.
Martial Arts,
Thank
Mayhem,
you.
they're all great. And
Yes.
our website, go to our website. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel, CC Media, Scan TV, Corvallis Access Media, KMUZ, KMWV Radio, and we have a podcast. Thank you to our amazing crew, Brad mainly, and some other folks like Brian, and our sponsors. Thank you for watching. Have a great day and great movies. Bye bye.